everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to make a bag that I get asked about all the time. For years I've been asked about this pattern because it is such a cool pattern. This is also going to be a great bag for men. So for those of you guys who are looking for a good gift for the guys, I think this is going to be a winner. Today we're going to make the Sandhill Sling, and this pattern comes to us from Noodlehead. You guys know. You know how much I love Noodlehead because I can't stop doing tutorials with their patterns, mostly just because I like to make the bags that she comes out with. But this is a sling that has been requested so many times on the channel. One, because I think you just want to watch it come together. But two, because the finishing method of this bag is so unique and a little challenging. We're going to talk a lot about that. You guys, you've had a lot of questions about it. So before we get to that, let's just look through this adorable bag. If you love the materials for this bag, this is June's Bag Making Bee Club Kit. So everything I'm showing you, except for my bag tag, is included in the kit. And there is so much extra material in this month's box. You could probably make a whole second one just using your own hardware. So the pattern has a couple different options for the front pocket. You could leave off the front pocket entirely. There is a front panel and a back panel and a gusset. If you're like, I don't need a pocket anywhere on the outside, then just leave front panel as is. If you want to use a snap, you can do that. We're going to use a zipper, and I'm choosing the hidden zipper option. So you see we have a little flap here that kind of hides that zipper. If you have a zipper tape that you really want to shine, don't use that cover up, okay? But we have this beautiful little zipper pocket here on the outside. Open it up, and we have a nice deep pocket. I am using a wax canvas for the exterior and a water-resistant canvas for the lining. I do suggest you use an exterior material that is not stiff, okay? We're gonna talk about why in just a minute. On the back, you see we just have a main back panel. If you wanted to add some sort of a zipper back here, you could. And then we have this beautiful sling. I'm loving the contrast of the webbing and the material we're using today. It's a contrast, but it's still very clean. I think it looks just great. So then we're gonna open up the zipper on the top. And when we look inside, we have this adorable bag tag. Let me see if you guys can get a good look at that. You see that tag? That tag is so cute, isn't it? It's such like a adventure bag to me. And we're gonna be doing a mesh pocket on the inside. If you would prefer to do a fabric or even wax canvas slip pocket, you have plenty of material in the kit to do that. Or you can, if you're using your own material, that's also an option. I just really love a mesh pocket. They're easy to install. They're quick. They're really useful. It's one of my preferred interior pockets, so that's why I put it in there. And then the other side is just the main panel. If you wanted to add a second slip pocket to the front, again, you definitely can do that. Lots of wiggle room here. Now, if you didn't notice, on the inside, we don't have any binding. Some of you guys are gonna love that. I know I get that question all the time, is how can we make a bag that we are using binding on without binding? And that's not always an easy thing to do. This is actually a drop-in lining bag. And if you've done drop-in linings, you might be like, say what now? How do you do a drop-in lining with that kind of a gusset? Pretty much what that means is we're gonna build the entire exterior of the bag as a bag, then we're gonna build the entire lining of the bag as a bag, and then we drop in the lining into the exterior, and we stitch it together. We have a couple stitches, but really the way it comes together is by stitching the top stitching next to the zipper. This is why it's so important that you use material that's not too stiff. This bag has to be able to wrap around the arm of your sewing machine and move and squish. If you're using a really thick, dense vinyl, that's gonna be really challenging. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use a really dense vinyl for this pattern. If you choose to do that, it just means we're gonna have to switch up how we finish it. So let me know in the comments down below if you would like to see this bag bounded, which means it's gonna have binding. We're gonna do a traditional sling with binding. We're not gonna do the drop-in lining. If I were using a fun, heavier vinyl, that would be my choice, is to bind it, which you can definitely do with the pattern. It's just a couple different extra steps. No more challenging in my opinion. So if you're interested in seeing that, let me know down in the comments and we can do another video just quickly going over how you would do that and what changes I would make. Okay, so let's see how this looks on. I have a really long strap on here. I don't know, I don't wear slings. Okay, here we go. I don't really wear slings all that much. Okay, so if you wanted to, you can wear the sling on your back. So here's the strap, and then here's the sling. twirly whirly. Like I said, I think this would be great for men. This is a very kind of, you know, gender neutral design. The material we're using, I believe, is very gender neutral. I love wax canvas because as you wear it and you crinkle it around and move it, it causes these like distressed lines. It does not make the material any weaker. It just gives it a really good texture. So thank you as always to Noodlehead for letting me feature your patterns on my channel. I'm a huge fan of Noodlehead. I was a fan of Noodlehead patterns. I say this almost every time. I was a fan of Noodlehead patterns before I ever made bags. Way back in the day when I was making quilts, I was following Noodlehead on social media and I was drooling over the bags going, oh my god, how on earth do you sew a zipper? Like, I could never make something like that. And Noodlehead patterns were some of the first patterns that I ever tried, and I was hooked. It like got me my sojo. Like some of the simple, I think it was, I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. I think it was the pedal pouch, but it was a simple zip pouch that I tried that was a Noodlehead pattern, and I was successful at it, and it was like, I got done with it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I made that, I'm amazing, this is so cool, and I was hooked, and then I started slowly trying other things. So that's the beauty of bag making. I would say this is definitely a confident beginner bag. I don't think you have to have a ton of experience. These corners are not difficult to sew. We don't have a zipper on a corner, we have a nice gusset. The hardest thing about this bag is going to be the finishing step, is doing that top stitching on the zipper when you drop it in. You also have options to hand sew. We'll talk about in the video. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shout outs, any other patterns you want to see? I know she's coming out with new ones all the time. If you want to see another pattern though, leave it down in the comment section. I think you're gonna love making this. I know I do. It's just such a chic, simple, beautiful bag. So let's get started. Okay, so I just wanted to show that if you did use the kit for this from the Bag Making Bee Club, you have the paper copy of this pattern, which is super helpful because it also has all of the paper templates already printed out, so you can just cut them out and get to work. So the pattern calls for 5/8 a yard of exterior material and 5/8 of a yard of lining material. For our exterior, we're going to be using a wax canvas, which is one of my favorite things to use. It's so malleable, but it's also firm, but easy to sew. It is a great beginner material, but it's also a great advanced material as well. You can do a lot with wax canvas. And then for the lining, we're using this water resistant canvas. This is like an Oxford water resistant canvas. It almost looks like linen. It's really cool. So it gives it a very crisp finished look, but the material has all the stabilizer in it. So the structure of the bag is going to come from the material itself. I also have about a fat quarter, less than that, of mesh. I'll be using mesh for the interior pocket today. This is not in the pattern, but it is one of my favorite lining pockets. It's quick, it's easy, it's durable, so we'll be using mesh for that. So here are all of our little bag hardware and accents. We have this beautiful bag tag that we'll be sewing into the lining of the bag. Then I have my metal bag tag, which is my OklaRoots on it. The sew-in bag tag is included in the kit if you purchase that. Then for the hardware, we have a 1.5 inch wide swivel hook and a 1.5 inch wide strap adjuster. So this is an adjustable strap. And then we have a 1 inch D-ring. This is not a removable strap, but you can take this off of one edge if you wanted to have 2 D-rings on the bottom corner so you can switch which way the sling goes. You could definitely do that, but I'm just using one. Then I have 3 zipper pulls. These are number 5 zipper pulls. Then I have my zipper tape. One thing to note with this pattern is it is kind of written for metal zippers, which are measured differently than zipper tape. So for me, I have 31 inches of zipper tape. That's going to be fine. Just make sure that if the pattern calls for an 8-inch zipper, that doesn't mean 8 inches of zipper tape. Usually an 8-inch zipper, after you account for the ends of the zipper as well, if it's a metal zipper, it's gonna be closer to 10 inches. So when you're looking at the pattern and you're looking at zippers, just make sure you always add a couple inches if the pattern calls for metal zippers and you're using zipper tape. And then I have my webbing. This is 1.5 inch wide webbing. This is so pretty. This is gonna be for the strap. And then I have a little bit of elastic here. This is going to be for that mesh pocket. Honestly, I forgot about this in the first time I made this bag, and I just used a strip of water resistant canvas that was 1 inch wide. So you have lots of options to make this pretty simple. So here's all the other stuff. I think I have it. So I have my seam ripper, my 1 inch by 6 inch ruler, and a lighter. These are just standard. My marking tools, I got a fun little collection of sew line tools here. One of these is a chalk pencil with 3 different chalk colors inside side of it, pink, white, and black. And then I have an air erasing marker, and then I have a water erasing marker. I have my rounded corner template. This is the 1, 2, 3, 4-inch one, not the halves one. I'm gonna use that to round the corners of the main panels. The pattern also has a printable that you can use to just trace out the corners, but since I have this, I'm just gonna use it. And then I have what I keep next to my sewing machine at all times, a bunch of clips, a pair of snips, and my stiletto. So for most of this, I'll probably be using this cream colored thread. I really like the way the top stitching pops with this. This on that navy wax canvas is really beautiful. This is a Tex 45 weight thread called Buttercream from Saya Swag. However, because of the construction of this bag and we're not binding it, the top stitching in the very end along the zipper does have the potential to get a little sloppy because it is a little bit challenging. So for that, I don't think I have a navy thread, but I'm going to use a thread that's gonna blend in really well. So this is from Wizardry Stitchery, also a Tex 45 weight thread, color silver. I would suggest that if you're not the strongest top stitcher, for that last bit of top stitching around the top of the zipper, I would suggest a color that blends with your material because it can get a little challenging. For the bobbin, however, I'm going to be using a Gutermann Mara 100 weight thread, and then my needle of choice is a Microtex 8012. I have some Beacon 3-in-1 glue and a little bit of duct tape. This is really just for my metal bag tag. Oh, and these were hiding, but I always have 1/4 inch wide and 1/8 of an inch wide double-sided tape. So let's go through our pattern pieces. First, you're gonna have your main panel, 2 cuts of exterior, 2 cuts of lining. This is the front and the back of the bag. We will be rounding these corners off in just a moment. Then we're gonna have our top and bottom gussets. For the top gusset, you're gonna have 2 cuts of exterior material and 2 cuts of lining material. These are gonna go around the zipper. For the bottom gusset, you're gonna have 1 cut of exterior and 1 cut of lining. All right, now these pieces I'm going to show you here are for that front exterior zipper pocket. Now I'm not doing the snap pocket, I am doing the zipper pocket. So I have the zipper pocket bottom, the zipper pocket top, and then I have a lining to go with the zipper pocket bottom. There's no lining for the top. This other small piece here is optional, but this is the zipper cover. This kind of just hides the zipper tape. If you want to show off your zipper tape, then just leave this off. However, this is a fun little detail. We just fold it in half and stitch it right over the zipper tape. It's really classy looking. Next up, we have our cuts for our bag strap. You're gonna have 2 cuts of the shoulder connector. You're gonna need to use the printable template for that. Both of these are an exterior. And then you're gonna have 1 small cut. This is gonna be for the D-ring connector on the bottom of the bag. If you're doing 2 D-rings, you're gonna need 2 of these. And then like I showed you before, your cut of mesh, or whatever you're going to use to make the pocket. You have plenty of material, if you have the kit, to make a slip pocket with either the exterior or the lining material. So let's start with the strap holder. You're going to take your little cut here and you're going to fold it in half, short sides together, wrong sides together, and press. And what's nice about wax canvas is that you don't even need a marking tool for it. You can just kind of scratch it or press it and you have a mark now. Then you're going to take those short edges and press them back wrong sides together to meet that midpoint mark. Wax canvas is another one of those materials where it's really not certain which side is the right side, which side is the wrong side. So whatever side you want to work with as the right side, you're correct. Once you have these 2 meeting in the middle and the back, you're going to fold it in half once again. So you have a nice little hot dog bun with folded edges on both long sides and raw edges on the 2 short sides. Now we can take this to the sewing machine and you're going to top stitch along both folded edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you want to do another row of top stitching elsewhere, you can. The pattern shows one going straight down the center. I think I'm going to do that. I might do that. Whatever you want, just make sure you do at least top stitch the 2 long folded edges. Once you have that top stitched, you're going to take it and wrap it around your 1-inch D-ring and just fold it over that. And then you can just baste right along the 2 raw edges, holding this in a fold at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once this is done, you can set this to the side. So now we're gonna work on the strap. If you'd like to kind of polish off this raw edge of your strap, you could add a little cover on it, so you can just get a piece of your wax canvas and cut it to be about 2 inches by 1.5 inches and just fold it and wrap it around this edge, top stitch it on, and now it's kind of a cleaner look. What I'm going to do is just double fold it. So I'm going to take one edge of my webbing and I'm going to thread it from the bottom up over that middle bar of my strap slider. I'm going to pull it down by about 2 inches and I'm going to fold it under. And so let's see how much this is. I just kind of eyeball this, just make sure it looks good. Like 1 inch here or there is really not gonna make much of a difference. But yeah, it's about, I mean, overall it's probably about 1 1/4 inch folded down. But I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm just going to kind of pull the strap adjuster away from that fold, and I'm going to top stitch along the folded edge and then the two sides at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'm just going to run my needle as close as I can get it to the strap adjuster. I find using a zipper foot for this is helpful, and I do backstitch at the beginning and the end. And then if you have any like little shaggy bits kind of poking out the top corners, you can just melt them down with a lighter. There we go. And that will just seal them in, so you don't have to worry about that fraying. There you go. Very cute. Now you're going to take your webbing and lay it folded side facing up. Keep it straight. Grab your hook and attach it hook side down. Thread it on. Once again, keeping this straight. Pull the raw edge of your webbing up to the side where the fold is, going from the bottom of the strap adjuster up and over that middle bar, just like this. So you see, this is not a removable strap, but it is an adjustable strap. And again, if you had the two D-rings, you could kind of switch out where you put this hook. So now grab your 2 cuts of your shoulder connector, and I'm going to find the midpoint along the short top edge of this little trapezoid. You can just do one of them, honestly. And then with this shoulder connector right side up, I'm going to grab my strap and I'm going to lay it along the top short edge and just center your webbing on that top edge, which is why you created that little midpoint mark on the top there. Use some clips to hold it together, and then take this to the sewing machine and just baste this webbing in place at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once you have that basted, grab your other connector piece and you're going to lay it right side down. Which side do I want to be the right side? Right side down so that the webbing is sandwiched in between, and just line it up so it has all of its edges matching with the other connector. Clip along the top and also along the sides of this connector piece. And now I'll take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along the sides and that top short edge all at 1/2 inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and the end. Also do a second row of stitching over the webbing just for a little bit of extra reinforcement. Once you have that sewn, you can clip down the corners. So I'm just going to clip down the 2 bottom corners first, kind of like a, not a 45-degree angle, but a shallow angle. And then I'm going to clip down the top corners. I'm not really cutting the webbing though. I mean, if you cut it a little bit, it's fine, but I'm mostly just worried about the corners. If you'd like to also cut down the sides a little bit, you can. A 1/2 inch seam allowance is pretty big. And then we're going to gently turn this right side out. And as you do that, you can just kind of pull on the webbing to help get it out. I'm going to use my little turning wand here to get in there and really poke out those corners. And now you don't have to top stitch this. I didn't on the last bag. I think I might this time just to see what it looks like. But if you're going to top stitch it, really make sure you get those corners poked out neatly and you flatten out these seams really well. With wax canvas, you don't want to iron this. That would not be good for your iron. So you don't need to, you just have to really take the time to massage those seams and get them nice and straight and flat. Now if you choose to top stitch this, just make sure you check which side is the right side. So for example, this would be the back side because of my hardware. So the right side would be just like this. So I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm gonna top stitch along all the edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you're not top stitching, at least baste this raw top edge closed also at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so let me show you the bag I've already made with no top stitching versus the bag I just made with the top stitching. So whatever look you're going for, if you don't add top stitching, you do have kind of a softer, cushiony look because you don't have those really crisp edges. If you love the look of top stitching, then do it. But either way, it looks great. All right, your strap is now done. You can set it to the side. So now let's work on that exterior front zipper pocket. I'm gonna take my zipper tape and I'm going to lay it over my front bottom pocket. And I'm going to cut it so it's just about 1/2 of an inch longer than the width of the pocket. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it. You don't want to cut too much, especially if you have a limited amount of zipper tape. But I like to have a little tiny bit of overhang. You actually don't even have to have any overhang. If you want to be conservative with your tape, let's do that, okay? So I'm just gonna lay my zipper tape over this. You could also just measure the width. But I'm gonna lay my zipper tape over this and I'm gonna mark where to cut. A ruler is obviously better. I just don't feel like getting it out. And then I'm gonna cut down my zipper tape so it's the same width as the panel. I know some folks, you have a limited amount of zipper tapes. You want to use as much as you can. So this is how you would do that. So now my zipper is the same exact width as my pocket. I'm going to take my zipper pull and I'm just going to add 1 pull to this zipper tape. And then with zipper tape, I always melt down the edges before I start working with it so I don't have to battle the fray. So now take the exterior bottom panel for the zipper and lay it right side up. Take your zipper and lay it right side down with zipper closing towards the left. And with them right sides together, line up the zipper along the top short edge of the exterior panel and clip right sides together. So now we can take this to the sewing machine with the zipper foot basted along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have that basted on, grab the lining bottom panel and lay it right side down so the right side is against the back side of the zipper and line it up with that top short edge and clip in place. So now take this to the sewing machine and just sew along this top clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Once that's sewn together, press the lining up and away from the zipper and then pull the lining wrong sides together back with the exterior. And before I baste this all, I'm just going to top stitch and then I'm going to add my bag tag. So for now, I'm just going to clip these two panels wrong sides together, lining up their corners and their sides. And then from the right side, I can just gently press that seam. That's the nice thing about wax canvas is it's very malleable. It's really easy to work with. So now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm just going to top stitch right along the seam on the exterior, just below the zipper at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. So now I'm going to add my bag tag to this pocket. And if you want to add the sew-on bag tag, you can do that here as well. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold this in half to find the midpoint right along my top stitching. I'm not going to mark it with anything though, because I don't need to. I can just kind of fold it, move the zipper out of the way. And then I'm going to measure 2 inches down from that midpoint mark. And I'm just going to make a mark centered 2 inches down. It can be wherever you want. You're not going to lose a whole lot. You're going to lose about 1/2 of an inch from the sides and the bottom. So if you want it lower, you can. Just make sure it's like 2 inches from the bottom. I'm just going to do it from the top over here. But I just made a little mark 2 inches down. Then I'm going to grab my washer and just make sure I know where the center of my washer is by putting it on my bag tag. Okay, it's always, mine are always a little offset, so it's always good to double check. And I'm just going to place my washer over that mark, and I'm gonna use I'm just using just something pointy. So this is like the pointy end of a seam ripper. I'm not cutting the material, I'm just marking it. So I have marks for my prongs now. So now I'm gonna grab a scrap piece of the wax canvas and use that as my stabilizer. So this is just a small piece, and I'm gonna mark those same placement slits on my scrap. And then I'm gonna pull the lining away from the pocket because I don't wanna go through the lining, only the exterior. I'm gonna carefully seam rip right along those marks. Always be very gentle with this. It's very easy to lose control and just slice it right through to the zipper. Don't do that. So once I have those cut on the material, I'm gonna do it to my stabilizer piece as well. And you could use, if you have like Decoville Light or Decoville Heavy or Fusible Fleece, you could use that too. I'm just gonna use what I got. So now I'm gonna insert my bag tag and just kind of give it a look. Make sure it's the way, yeah, that's cute, isn't it? That's so cute. So with metal bag tags, I always like to add a little bit of glue to the back of them. Add some little bit of security to them. Not too much though. And then I'm just gonna carefully slide this in to my slits, flip it over. Then I'll add my scrap stabilizer over the prongs, and then I'll add the washer. Fold the prongs in on themselves, flip this over, arrange everything, make sure it's not crooked or anything before the glue dries. That looks good. And then last step is I add a little bit of duct tape over the prongs so that these metal bits don't rub against the lining and wear it down over time. Okay, so now that I have my bag tag on, I can move on to the next step. So now I'm gonna add my zipper cover. So take your zipper cover cut and you're going to fold it long sides together, wrong sides together. And just give it a nice fold. And if you're using material that's difficult to stay folded, you can baste along this raw edge to hold it in place. Wax canvas is not going to be a problem. So now we're going to take this fold, and with the folded edge facing down towards the zipper teeth, we're going to line it up on the top edge of our zipper tape and clip together. So you see it just covers your zipper. Very cute. Now we can go to the sewing machine and just baste along that clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once your little zipper cover is in place, you're going to take the top panel for the zipper and you're going to lay it, let's see which side, right side up, and then you're going to flip it right side down so it's right sides together with the bottom panel and line it up along that edge you just basted. So you have a bit of a sandwich here. You have that zipper cover sandwiched between here. This is also a good time to point out that your zipper cover shouldn't be material that's too thick unless you're used to working with really thick vinyl and stuff for this. Then it's fine. It's just you're gonna have quite a few layers here. Now we're gonna sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, backstitching at the beginning and the end. So now press that top panel up and away from the zipper and keep the little cover pressed down. Don't top stitch this yet, just press it up and away. Okay, now this panel might be a little tall, so what I like to do is just kind of take my main panel, and you can do this either way. You can lay your main panel over it, or you can use your grid and a rotary cutter. I'm just gonna kind of lay my main panel over this panel. And then I'll use my marking tool and I'm just gonna mark on the bottom edge of the pocket. So if your pocket panel is bigger than the main panel, you wanna cut the bottom edge down. So a rotary cutter is the best way to do this, but I'm just gonna use scissors because that's what I got. Okay, so now take your front main panel and lay it right side up, and then take your pocket panel and lay it right side up and overlay it on the front main panel, just like this. I thought this part was a little interesting because as you can see, you don't see the front main panel at all. The pocket panel is now the front main panel, but the front main panel is going to be the inside of the pocket. It's part of the lining. So one side is the lining, the other side is the exterior, which I thought was neat. But this also makes the bag keep its shape really nicely because you have all these layers, which again, if you're using really thick material, this can be a little tricky. So I'm just clipping all the sides to hold this in place, making sure those corners are matching up. Now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm gonna baste along all 4 edges of our little sandwich here at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure the exterior main panel and the pocket panel stay together. All right, once you have the sides all basted and this is nice and flat, now you can top stitch along this top seam here. So it's above this little flap that covers your zipper. It's above the seam there, all right? So we're gonna top stitch at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just above that seam. You might have to move your zipper out of the way while you do this. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. All right, so just double check you didn't top stitch the bottom on accident. When you open your zipper, you should be able to put your hand in that pocket just like that, but you can't go up, you can only go down. Okay, your front panel is done. You can set it to the side. All right, so now we're gonna work on the interior pocket. So you're gonna need one of your main lining panels and your pocket of choice. If you wanna build a pocket, that's totally fine. If you wanna use the mesh pocket, that's what I'm gonna do. I think mine's a little on the tall side, so you might wanna measure it down. Okay, so decide which side is gonna be the top. And I'm going to lay my fold over elastic wrong side up. So there's a shiny side and a matte side. Either one of those can be the right side. I like the matte side more. So I'm just going to lay my mesh over the fold over elastic so that the top of the mesh lines up with that fold over midpoint. If you want to use double-sided tape here, you can, but you don't need to. So I'm just gonna wrap it around the top of my mesh. And now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch along the bottom edge of this elastic, not the fold side, but the kind of raw edge side, at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and the end. So now take your lining panel you want to add this pocket to and lay it right side up. Take your pocket and lay it right side up. Match up the bottom edge and the sides, and just clip these together. If you're using the elastic, you might want to measure down from the top and make sure that the top edges of your pocket meet up at the same size so it's not tilted. Mine might be a little tilted. I don't know. That's fine with me. So now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and just baste down the sides and the bottom all at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that basted on, if you have overhang on the sides, you can trim it down. All right, so before I finish, I'm gonna attach my bag tag. I will say my pocket is a little bit taller. I probably should have made it at least an inch shorter than this, but that's fine. As long as it's not within 1/2 of an inch from the top, it's not gonna be eaten up. But I'm gonna attach my bag tag just centered right above this pocket. And if it's easier, you can mark the midpoint first. And when attaching this, just make sure it's at least an inch away from the top edge. You don't want it to get eaten up in the seam. So I'm just gonna put it right above my pocket. Now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm gonna top stitch along all 4 sides of my tag at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, there you go. Your lining panel is now done. So now we're gonna round out these corners. You're gonna need to do it for all 4 of your main panels, your lining and your exterior. And if you're using the rounded corner template, it's gonna be the 3-inch side. So if you're not using this, then you're just gonna cut out the template that's in the pattern. But if you're using this handy dandy tool, you just line up the 3-inch corner and mark around the curve, and that will tell you where to cut. You could also put this on a cutting mat and just use a rotary cutter. So you see, after I have them marked, then I just grab some scissors and cut them down. It's just a slight curve. It's not too sharp of one, so very manageable. So repeat this for the other exterior and the 2 lining panels. All right, once you have these corners cut, if you'd like, you can take your exterior and lining panels that have the pockets attached, and you can just baste along the cut corners because we did remove the basting stitches. I am gonna do that because when we have to sew this to the gusset, it's really helpful if I don't have to worry about these layers being detached. So while we have all these panels out, I suggest you mark midpoints on all 4 edges of each of these panels. So obviously find the midpoint on the top and the bottom of each panel. You can just fold this in half to do that. And I'm gonna use scissors to cut into this. But then take those top and bottom midpoint marks, bring them together, go around the curved edges, and then also mark the midpoints on the sides. This is gonna make the last step a lot easier. So do this for all 4 panels. Okay, once you have all 4 of your panels prepped and ready to go, you can set them to the side. So now let's work on that zipper gusset, and if you're using the kit, your zipper tape should be quite a bit longer. I'm gonna go ahead and add my zipper pulls now, but you could add them later if you're comfortable doing that. When you add the zipper pulls, make sure you add 1 from each end, so they should be coming together. They shouldn't be opening and closing in the same direction. So now I'm gonna take my zipper tape, and I'm going to find the midpoint on this long zipper tape by just folding it in half, and I will be using a marking tool for this, not my scissors. So I'll just use this chalk pencil to mark on the fold. Try to mark on the front and the back and on both sides. Once you have that done, you can mark the midpoint on your exterior materials on both long edges. You could also mark the midpoint on the lining if you'd like, or you can just do the exterior. Actually, so here's what I wanted to mention. This is where things start getting a little different from what you're used to. If we were gonna be binding this, then many of you guys should know how we attach these 4 panels. However, this is a drop-in lining, which is a little crazy for a sling, but we're gonna go through that. Like I said in the beginning, if you guys are interested in how to make this sling using binding instead, let me know. With thicker material, I would really suggest the binding. But we're gonna do this because it's cool. So I am gonna mark the midpoints on both of the lining sides, which I'm not even sure I need to do, but I'm gonna do it. I think these are actually gonna be hidden later. Just in case, I'll do it now. Okay, so kind of the interesting thing we're gonna do now is that we're gonna build the full gusset for the exterior and the full gusset for the lining separately, which is wild. So the exterior part of the gusset is gonna have the zipper, the lining won't. So we're gonna start with just the exterior gusset, so you can put the lining gusset pieces to the side. Take one of your exterior gusset panels and lay it right side up. Grab your zipper and lay your zipper right side down and match up the midpoint marks on the zipper and on your long edge of your gusset. And your zipper tape should be long enough for you to kind of move these zipper pulls out of the way without losing them. So now we're going to sew along this long clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Once you have that stitched on, press the gusset up and away from the zipper, but do not top stitch. I know, we're gonna wait till the very end to top stitch this. This is where we do the drop-in lining. Can you start to picture now how it's gonna go? So just press that away. Again, if you had a really thick material here, this would be a little difficult. If you're choosing to hand stitch the lining into place, which we'll talk about once we get there, then you can top stitch this here. I'm not hand stitching them. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip my zipper tape around and I'm gonna take my other zipper gusset and I'm gonna lay it right side down, lining it up with the midpoint first. And then I'm gonna double check and make sure my sides are lined up with the other exterior gusset panel. Then I'm just gonna clip along this long edge. And now sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Now flip your exterior panel up and away from the zipper. This is why wax canvas is so great, because you don't even have to do anything, you just have to press it with your fingers. Now move both your zippers into the center. Now grab your exterior bottom gusset and you're gonna lay it right side down over your zipper gusset. My zipper gusset's a little bit wider than the bottom gusset. That's fine. What I wanna do is I'll find the midpoint on the short edge of my gusset by just folding it and pinching. And I'm going to line it up with my zipper teeth and just short edge to short edge clip these together. I would say mine is probably about a 1/4 inch. My zipper gusset is probably about a 1/4 inch wider. I'm not gonna trim down the long edges of this. I'll show you what I do in just a minute. So now on this short edge over here that I have clipped, I'm gonna sew these together at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Once you have one side done, you're going to keep your gusset flat and right sides together with your top gusset, and you're gonna repeat this on the other side. So once again, use a midpoint if you need it. Center it on the top gusset, clip the short edges right sides together, and then sew along that short edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Now you can trim down this long overhang of your zipper tape now if you'd like. I'm gonna leave it for now. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it for now. I can always trim it down later. So I'm gonna flip my gusset so it's right side out. And you wanna press these short side seams behind the bottom gusset, so away from the zipper. Do this on both sides. And now we're gonna take these to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch along the bottom gusset edge of that seam at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end on each side. I'm gonna switch over to my darker colored thread now because this will have to match up with a step in the future. Okay, once you have your top stitching done, if you have a situation like I do where the top zipper gusset is a little bit wider than the bottom gusset, see how it overhangs here on the right? I'm just gonna line my scissors up right along the edge of the bottom gusset, and I'm just gonna kind of cut into the top gusset at an angle and just shave off the corner. It doesn't have to be the exact same width. It's gonna be totally fine. Remember, we have a 1/2 inch seam allowance for this. You don't even have to do this. You could just leave it. But I know it can make things a little confusing, so I'm just going to shave off at an angle to get these to line up. Okay, your exterior gusset is now done. You can set it to the side. So now we're gonna make the lining gusset. So you're gonna grab your lining gusset bottom panel and then your 2 top lining gusset panels, and these are gonna be eventually attached to the zipper. So on the back, on the wrong side of your zipper lining gusset panels, you're gonna measure up from one long edge on each one of them and mark a line that is 1 inch above that long edge. These long edges that we're focused on, these are gonna be what end up against the zipper tape. So if you have a preference, think about that now. And then right below each of those 1 inch marks, I added a piece of double-sided tape. We're pretty much just folding this back by 1/2 of an inch. So I'm gonna remove the tape and I'm gonna take the long edge and I'm gonna fold it back wrong sides together so the long edge meets up with that mark and gets stuck to that tape, and press. If you don't wanna use double-sided tape, you could also use an iron for this. But just make sure you have that edge firmly pressed. If you also need to use clips, that's okay. We'll be able to remove those later. So on the back side, it should look just like this, and on the right side, you should have one clean folded edge, and then the rest of them are raw edges. So do this with the other zipper panel as well. All right, so now, this might be a little different. We're gonna take our bottom gusset and we're gonna lay it right side up. Then we're gonna take our 2 zipper gussets and we're gonna lay them right side down, wrong side up. The folded edges are gonna be pointed in towards the center, so towards one another. Taking one zipper gusset, line it right sides together with the bottom gusset, and match up the top corner. Use some clips to hold these panels together. And then take the other zipper gusset and match it up with the bottom corner on the same short edge. So you see there's a gap between the 2 zipper panels where our fold is. So now we're gonna sew along the short edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Once you have that sewn, pull each zipper panel short edge over to the other short edge of the bottom gusset, and once again clip it corner to corner with the folded over edge of the zipper panels facing the center. And now you can sew this other short edge right sides together at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Once you have that done, you're gonna flip this right side out and press the seam behind the bottom gusset. We're not top stitching yet, so give it just a good finger press for now. All right, you can set your lining gusset to the side. So now we're gonna attach our strap. So take your back panel, exterior panel, and lay right side up, and then grab your strap and lay your strap right side up. So hardware for the slider should be facing right side up. Center the top straight raw edge of your strap connector with the midpoint on the back panel. And I did not mark the center, so I'm just gonna do that real quick. So line these up midpoint to midpoint and clip along that raw edge. And then you can take these both, you can do these both at the same time. Take your little D-ring, and whichever side you want to put it on, we're going to baste it on as well. So I'm doing it on the bottom left side here, but measure in from either side, 1 1/4 inch, and the outer edge of your strap connector should line up with that. And if you're doing 2, you're just going to measure in both sides. So now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna baste along both the top connector and the bottom connector at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alrighty, time to build the exterior. So you need to have your exterior back panel and fold in your strap here because you don't want to accidentally sew that into the seam. I've done it before. So back panel, front panel, and I would put my zipper in the center on the front panel so you don't sew over it. And then your gusset. On your gusset, you need to make sure you have the midpoints marked on the top edge where the zipper is, and then use that to find the midpoints on the bottom of the gusset, and then use those two to bring together and find the midpoints between them on the sides of the gusset, okay? You need 4 midpoint marks on all of these. So let's start with the front panel. Lay your front panel right side up, and then take your gusset and flip your gusset so it's lining side out. And I know my zipper tape is really long. I'll trim it down later. And I'm going to take the midpoint mark on the zipper gusset panel and lay it right sides together with the top edge of my main front panel and clip these together there. And then on the bottom here, I'm going to take my bottom gusset and lay it right side down, matching up the midpoint with the bottom of the front panel. Clip those together. And then we'll go over to the sides. Midpoint marks on the gusset side with the side panel of the front panel. And do this on both sides. And then continue clipping along all the straight edges. You'll see that it's a little bit more difficult once you get to the curves. Just ignore that for now. Only focus on the straight bits. So once you get to these corners, you're gonna cut into the gusset, not the main panel, only the gusset. And you can cut about 1/4 inch deep, like between 3 and 5 slits. And then what you wanna do is you wanna push down, might be easier from the top, you wanna push down that corner of the main panel into the gusset and let the gusset spread out around that corner. This would be very challenging to do if you didn't cut into it, but once you make those slits, you should find this pretty easy to do. So I want to flatten this out by just pinching that edge and spreading the gussets. Do that for all 4 corners. Okay, now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I like to sew my gussets with the wrong side of the gusset facing up and the back of the main panel facing down. Do not come at me in the comments if that is not how you like to do it and you try it and it doesn't work. If you always make these gussets the opposite way, if you always sew your gussets so that the main panel is facing up and the gusset's facing down, then just do that. If that's what works for you, then do what works for you. If you're new to this and you don't know which way works for you, try one way with this panel, then try the other way with the other panel. Do what works for you. This is what works for me. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, gusset wrong side up, main panel facing right side up. I'm going to sew along the entire edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I like to use a zipper foot for this and backstitch at the beginning and the end. So once you have that sewn in place, you can turn it out and just check your corners, make sure you don't have any pleating or anything. It's a pretty easy corner to sew, but I think mainly it's easy because of the wax canvas. Because if we were using a stiff material, that could be a little tricky. Okay, open your main zipper slightly. Now grab your exterior back panel and lay it right side up, tucking in your strap in the very center. Make sure your D-ring is pointed up towards the top, and then flip your bag down and line up the 4 midpoint marks on the other edge of your gusset with the 4 midpoint marks on your back exterior panel. And I like just flip the whole thing over so I'm looking at the back of the exterior panel, and I'm going to clip along the straight edges. And then once again, you can cut little slits into the gusset around the corners so it can spread out around those. So once again, I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and with my gusset facing wrong side up, I'm going to sew around the entire edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end, use a zipper foot and a stiletto, go slow around those curves. Okay, so after I got done sewing, I just did a 2nd row of stitching along the top edge where the strap connector is, and also on that bottom section where that D-ring connector is. And hopefully I didn't eat up my, yay, I didn't sew in my strap. So now I'm going to take this bag and turn it right side out. First, I am going to trim down my zipper so that it has an overhang of about 1 inch. Don't cut it right at the seam because when we insert the lining, we want to make sure there's a bit of a buffer there. But go ahead and melt down the edges of your zipper tape before you turn it right side out. Now carefully flip the bag so you can see the pretty side. If you feel like any of the seams are really bulky because of that 1/2 inch seam allowance, you can trim them down. I find with wax canvas it's fine, I don't really need to, but with a thicker material you might want to trim at least the seams where the corners are. And I would just trim the seam allowance in half, no more than No more than half. Oh yeah, this is looking so cute. So cute, so cute. Okay, you see? So now you have your bag. You have the exterior of your bag. Now we just have to build the lining and drop it in and sew it together. So you can set this to the side for just a little bit. So now grab your lining main panels in your lining gusset, and we're gonna do that exact same thing. So if you haven't marked midpoints on all 4 edges of the main panels or on your gusset, go ahead and do that. Once again, gusset midpoints are the top and the bottom panels, and then use those midpoints to mark on the side. So now take one of your lining panels and lay it right side up. Take your lining gusset, flip it so it's wrong side out. And just like we did on the exterior, you're gonna line up all 4 of the midpoint marks, right sides together. And then for these corners, you're gonna do the same thing you did with the exterior, where you kind of cut into the seam allowance, about 1/4 of an inch or so, and let it spread around the corners. You might find these are either a little bit easier or trickier. They're easier because the material's thinner, but at the same time they're a little trickier because wax canvas is just easier to work with and waterproof canvas is a bit more stiff. It's the lining, it doesn't have to look perfect. Just get the gusset to wrap around the corner. So now, making sure you keep the other zipper gusset out of the way, we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and sew along all the clipped edges at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, one side is done. I know mine is a little chaotic because of the clips on that folded edge. Just ignore those. Take your remaining lining panel and lay it right side up. Flip your gusset unit over and attach the gusset to the lining panel just like you previously did. All right, once again, I'm gonna do it with the lining facing wrong side up, and I'm going to stitch it a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around, backstitch at the beginning and the end. Alrighty, so for the lining, just cut the seam allowance in half after you're done stitching so it's not bulky. Quickly, before you start cutting down the seam allowance of your lining, do not cut the seam allowance along the top edge of the zipper gusset in the lining. Leave that seam allowance at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. It's okay if it's a little wonky. Nobody's gonna know. So cut the seam allowance on both sides. So now for the interesting part, we're gonna just drop this in to the exterior. Now, if you wanna add some double-sided tape here, you can. I think I did before. I don't know if I need to just yet. So I'm gonna open up my exterior and we're gonna flip the top panel down so that we see that seam between the main panel and the gusset, just like that. And before we drop this in, if you lost your midpoints on the top edge of your lining, let's remark those, okay? Because it is helpful if we have them. So I'm just grabbing that seam between the main panel and the gusset, and I'm going corner to corner to fold it in half. Oh, we weren't supposed to cut. I did it again. I did it again. You know, I did this when I was practicing it, and I told myself I wouldn't do it when we did the video, and I did it again. I accidentally cut the seam allowance on the top edge of this lining panel, which I did not mean to do. You're not supposed to cut down the seam allowance on the top edge of your lining gusset. I did. We're gonna work with what we got, okay? So we're gonna take our gusset and we're going to insert it into the exterior, wrong sides together. My mesh pocket is along the back panel because that's just where I want it. So now, this is gonna be a little tricky, but pretty much what I wanna do is I wanna make sure that my stitching on the lining matches up with the stitching on the gusset, which is why you were not supposed to cut down the seam allowance on the lining, but you know what? Life is a highway. So I'm just gonna use the midpoint marks and the stitching as guide. It's okay if it's not perfect. You can see since I cut down my seam allowance in half, it comes down a little bit like that. I'll make sure I put something up on the screen to warn you. So we're gonna go around the curves, and we're just pretty much going around the corner and the top edge. That's what we're attaching. So remember, this is the seams between the main panels and the gusset. So do this on both sides, and if you cut into your seam allowance like I did, it's even okay if you raise your lining up just a scotch, just to be careful. So once again, I'm just clipping along the top edge of this seam. And I have the ends of the zippers, so the zipper part of the exterior is folded away, the folded edge of the zipper gusset on the inside is folded away. Okay, so what we're gonna do right now is we're anchoring the lining to the exterior. So what we wanna do is just sew pretty much along this top straight edge, connecting the lining gusset with the exterior gusset. I'm gonna do this with my exterior wrong side up so I can see the stitching I already made. I don't want the new stitching to go deeper and into my panel. So I don't want it to go closer to my zipper. I want to just stay right on top of it or just a little bit outside of it, closer to the raw edge. So I'm just going to go from corner to corner on both sides, stitching the lining and the exterior together. Take your time with this. Okay, once you have that stitching done, just check the lining section and make sure you caught the lining. As long as you caught the lining, you are good. All right, ready for the last step? This is where it gets a little tricky, and this is where the material really matters. You're gonna pull your zipper back, and you're gonna pull your lining back, and the fold on that piece of your lining is going to match up just a scotch above the stitching. So it should cover the stitching just barely. You don't want it too close to the zipper teeth, but it should cover your stitching. And if you need to flatten out that seam really well on the exterior, do that. So you see I'm just going around. I'm going to use clips here to clip the lining to the stitching. Now this isn't so hard on the top. Where it gets a little tricky is on the sides. So just take your time. If you want to use some double-sided tape for this, you can. And then you're going to go all the way down to the bottom down here. And just keep clipping. With wax canvas, this is not that challenging, okay? You should be able to move around your material pretty easily. So you see, this is what one side looks like. It's all turned out on this side. It's all clipped in on the inside. Do the same thing on the other side. Okay, this is the tricky part. If you have a bed on your machine that you can take off, you should do that now. You should take that bed off because we really just want to work with the arm. Because what we're going to do is we're going to wrap our bag around the arm and we're going to top stitch right along this edge by our zipper at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to go along the zipper tape until you get down to that gusset top stitching. You're going to go right over the bit of gusset top stitching that's below your zipper and then go back up the other side, up the zipper tape, and repeat on the other gusset side. Go slow on this. Make sure you're constantly checking that your lining didn't pull away from your exterior. If you are like, I don't want to do that, a much more clean professional look is going to be if you hand stitch this lining in place with a hidden stitch. It's not hard to do, it's just going to take some time. However, I'm going to do it at the sewing machine. We're going to do this together. I think we can do it. We got this. All right, let's see how it turned out. It's tricky. That part is really, really tricky. So like I said, if you're not a strong top stitcher, I suggest using a thread that kind of hides, but as long as your material is flexible, you should be okay. And you want to make sure you caught all the lining on the inside. You can zip it up. Everything is good. Let's look inside. If you have any spot where maybe the lining slipped and you didn't quite catch it, instead of undoing it all and redoing it, just hand stitch that spot. Just grab a needle and thread and just kind of stitch that one spot into place. No one's gonna know. But this actually turned out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. So when you're done, you can zip it all up. I love these zipper pulls. And then on the back, you can shorten this up, attach your sling. How stinking cute is this? Isn't this such a sweet bag? Wouldn't this be so fun for summer travel? I love it. And I feel like this is also a great option for the guys. I know we're always trying to figure out what to make the guys. This would be a good one. I don't know if we're past Father's Day when you watch this video, but this could be a good one. All right, what do you think? I know, it's like it's another one of those bags, like 95% easy, just the last step. That's pretty common with bag making. Oftentimes, by the time you're on the last step of a bag, you have a lot of structure and a lot of firmness in the bag, so it's a little bit more difficult to finish. However, like I said, if you're interested in seeing this as a bound version, it's very simple. Just like we've done so many times, you just build a front panel, a back panel, the complete gusset with lining and exterior attached to the zipper already, and then you just put it together and bind it. So if that's something you want to see, let me know. It would be a very quick, simple thing to add on. But if you haven't tried a drop-in lining like this, I suggest you give it a try. I mean, it's very original, it's very unique, and for those of you who just really love the look of a finished lining, like, I know that not everybody loves the look of binding inside of a bag. If you want that polished, finished look, this is how you're gonna get it. I hope you love sewing this as much as I do. If you make this bag using the tutorial, make sure you share it on social media and you tag me. I'm OklaRoots literally everywhere. I want to see what you're making. If you want to send me a photo of it, you can send it to jessica@oklaroots.com. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.